I think we are ready to start. Welcome again. Good morning. My name is Oleg Skulkin. I'm head of digital forensics and incident response team at Group IB. And today, once again, we are going to talk about ransomware. I hope you already downloaded our annual report, Ransomware Uncovered, and you are already well aware of various tactics, techniques, and procedures which were used by various ransomware affiliates and by various ransomware gangs throughout the year. But still, we'll briefly discuss all of this, what have changed, what not, what's going on now, because we spent quite a few time already this year, and some of information was not included in the report, and ransomware gangs still quite active. Of course, some ransomware service programs were closed, but at the same time, as they mainly consist of various affiliates, these affiliates may start their own ransomware as a service program or just jump to those which are active. For example, Logbit is very active, and many affiliates jump to this ransomware service program. Also, as now Conti almost closed, then the affiliates moved to Hive, for example, as well. So anyway, let's start from our key findings. So first of all, we observed that many threat actors, many ransomware affiliates nowadays, they have the same set of tactics, techniques, and procedures. First of all, it happened because affiliates of one ransomware as a service program jumped to another ransomware as a service program, so they may exchange their tactics, techniques, and toolset. And another thing, that Conti manual that were used by the affiliates leaked, so many other threat actors may just use it to build their strategy, then attacking various enterprise networks. Also, some affiliates, for example, Fisheye, who affiliated with REvil and Logbit, for example, also presented his own manual. So both manuals allowed many other ransomware affiliates to learn and to use the toolset and tactics and techniques in their attacks. So currently, we see very similar set of TTPs if we are talking about human-operated ransomware attacks, and in some cases it's quite difficult to distinguish one group from another. So the second finding is initial access brokers. So these guys are gaining access to various enterprise networks, and they do not do any post-exploitation. Instead, they just use this access to sell it or to provide it to other threat actors for some percentage of ransom they'll get if they successfully attack and deploy ransomware or exfiltrate data, for example. And this fact that there are quite a few initial access brokers, and it allowed many threat actors, even not very skilled, to gain access to quite big enterprises and successfully attack them. Number 3, expanded toolset for rent. Traditionally, ransomware as a service programs provided their affiliates with just ransomware, but now they tend to expand their capabilities, and they may provide their affiliates not only with ransomware, but also with tools for data exfiltration. Because in most attacks we investigated, representatives of ransomware service programs exfiltrated data before they deploy ransomware. What's more, in some cases, these affiliates, they only exfiltrated data, because in some cases it's quite hard for the threat actors to impair defenses. That's why the only thing that they can do is just exfiltrate data and use it to get ransom. So, for example, Lockbit have its own stealbit stealer that can be used by the affiliates to exfiltrate data automatically. What's more, usually such stealers, they exfiltrate data faster than traditional methods that they use by threat actors. For example, many threat actors use tools like Megasync or rclone to exfiltrate data to web services. Next finding is rebrands. So as many threat actors had some hard times because law enforcement showed big interest to them, and we even see that some representatives of various ransomware-as-a-service programs were finally jailed. So many groups finished their activities, but very soon we saw that a new ransomware-as-a-service program emerged, and we saw code similarities. We saw similarities in DLS, for example. At the same time, it's not always mean that it's really a rebrand, because these guys, they may outsource a lot of things, and ransomware service programs, they consist of many various threat actors, so they can purchase various services from other providers, and it may only mean that the same provider was used to develop, for example, ransomware, or develop DLS, or any other tools that are used by the threat actors, for example, configured Cobalt Strike server. And last but not least, they still see that the threat actors ask more. So on the next slide, we'll see some numbers. They still can get access to really big enterprises, and as they exfiltrate data, and they have quite good understanding of if this or that victim can pay them, so they decide to ask for more and more and more. It really depends on the business they are attacking. So in some cases they may ask for just a few thousands dollars. In other cases they may ask for millions, and it's absolutely okay, and it depends on the business. So if it's big business, then the ransom demand will be astronomical. If it's small business, then threat actors most likely ask for a small amount. Okay, let's talk a bit about numbers. So first of all, 63%, it's the percentage of cases where data was exfiltrated. So still many threat actors focus on this extortion technique as well. So of course there are some threat actors, especially those who focus on public facing RDP servers. Such attacks are usually quite fast, and threat actors don't exfiltrate any data. But if we are talking about medium and big business, then in this case threat actors may spend quite a lot of time researching the infrastructure. They may exfiltrate data for months even, so it doesn't mean that they will do it very fast. So, and it's a good detection opportunity, because if threat actors trying to exfiltrate data from multiple endpoints, from multiple servers, then you have good chances of detecting some malicious activity. So average ransom demand grew as well. So as you can see on the slides, now it's to $47,000. And the highest ransom demand is really astronomical. So this demand belonged to Hive Ransomware-as-a-Service program, and from one of their victims, they asked for 240 millions. So it's absolutely crazy. but still, as the victim was quite big enterprise, they decided that potentially they may pay them that much. Average downtime is 22 days. Of course, it doesn't mean that a company doesn't work for 22 days, but it means that from ransomware deployment and from the start of recovery process to its finish, in average, is 22 days. And if we are talking about how long the threat actors are into the compromised network, average dwell time is 9 days, but you should understand that if we are talking about low-skilled threat actors that who don't exfiltrate data and they don't need to spend much time in the network and they don't want to remove backups, they don't want to encrypt the whole network, and even a few servers are enough for them, then they may spend a few hours from initial access to impact. If we are talking about high-profile attacks, if we are talking about targeted attacks, we're not talking about huge enterprises. Of course, usually threat actors spend quite a lot of time in the network exfiltrating data, trying to find key assets and all that. And in such cases, it may be a few weeks or even more, or even a few months if they want to exfiltrate a lot of data. And this, of course, allows defenders to detect the threat actors before it's too late. Of course, if they have proper monitoring capabilities and if they have skilled people who can do it. So, if you checked my new book, Incident Response Technique for Ransomware Attack, you may already seen this unified ransomware kill chain. As I already mentioned, many ransomware attacks nowadays are quite similar, even from the perspective of tactics, techniques, and procedures. So having some unified kill chain for such attack sounded like a good idea. So as you can see here on the slides, there are 3 levels. Of course, you should try to detect the threat actors on the first level. Second level may be good as well. So if they start moving laterally and trying to exfiltrate data, it's good enough for detection. But of course, it's better to detect the threat actors and then try to escalate privileges, dump credentials, just scan network or collect any information about Active Directory, for example. But still, second level is okay as well. And the third level, usually it's too late to detect because threat actors already have everything they need, exfiltrated everything they wanted to exfiltrate, so they just quite quickly prepare network for deployment and deploy ransomware and start the extortion process. Okay, let's look at various chains of the kill chain. So level 1, so the first thing first, then let's talk about initial access. As you can see, still external remote services are a very, very popular initial access type. So we saw, for example, Phobos, Harma, and even some high-profile threat actors who use publicly facing RDP servers, or, for example, VPN to get into the network. Usually, it's quite small or middle-sized companies who use such access. But in some cases, we saw that even huge enterprises, they may not be well aware about such publicly facing services. And unfortunately, even if system administrators, for example, use such servers to get into the network and to work on something during the weekend, for example, and they think, okay, I just put it outside for 2 days and they think that they have strong password and nothing bad will happen. But we had a few cases there such behavior led to full network compromise and even data exfiltration, and of course ransomware deployment. So next thing is phishing. As you know, many bots like Buzzalord, Emotet, IcedID, QBot, all of them are used by various Ransomware-as-a-Service program representatives. So such small infection from 1 or 2 hosts with very commonly used bots may again lead to full domain compromise if you miss post-exploitation. Next, exploiting public-facing application, another quite popular initial access technique. We saw a few vulnerabilities, for example, in Exchange servers like proxy logon and proxy shell, and these vulnerabilities led to a lot of ransomware incidents. Many threat actors, REvil, Conti, Logbit, and many others used this vulnerability to gain access to enterprise networks, and it was quite easy for them, and these vulnerabilities were the most popular. So also, we have some other techniques that we used. A good example is dark side affiliates who, for example, compromised a website of some software provider for camcorders, and then used a legitimate installer to get access to their targets, as it included malicious code. So then the victim downloaded it to update the software. They updated it, but also it dropped a malicious file to disk, so it allowed them to get access and perform post-exploitation. So one more thing that happens on level 1, then threat actors successfully got initial access. They'll do quite a few things. So again, from perspective of detection, it's very good to understand that ransomware emerges in the network not just immediately, but usually threat actors perform quite a few various activities, for example, to understand where are they, to understand are any remote systems available. They also need escalate privileges. They may want to become persistent on the system. For example, if they use bots like QBot, IcedID, and all that, usually quite common persistent mechanisms are used, like scheduled tasks or modifying run keys and all that, or creating new services. At the same time, threat actors may use legitimate software like TeamViewer or AnyDesk or any other remote access tools, and they may use such remote access tools to become persistent, not only on initial compromised host, but they may move laterally and install such remote access software to some service, for example. And if you don't do proper investigation after the successful attack, the threat actors may provide this access to other gangs or use it to get into the network once again, and especially if they were not paid, and perform post-exploitation and deploy ransomware or exfiltrate more data again. So again, as I mentioned, this level is very good for detection. So it's the level of the unified ransomware kill chain where you should detect the threat actors if they get initial access. So next level starts when threat actors already performed reconnaissance of the network. Then they got some elevated credentials, so they already escalated their privileges, and now they want to move laterally through the network. They want to discard the key assets because many of them want to exfiltrate data. Even if they don't want to exfiltrate data, most of the threat actors they want to find backups, because if they don't wipe backups, then most likely they won't be paid, because the victim can just use backups to recover everything in the network, and there is no need to pay. So what they may want to discover, this may be database servers, maybe file servers, backup servers, of course. Maybe some computers belong to top management or system administrators, as system administrators may have quite a lot of valuable data for threat actors. Also, many threat actors want to jump from Windows environment to Linux environment, because many organizations have quite a few Linux servers that may contain very valuable data, and threat actors want to get there as well, because nowadays many threat actors have Linux ransomware, not only ransomware for Windows. So Logbit, Conti, and others, Black Cat, all of them have Linux version now. So to get everywhere, they most likely need to get on hosts that belong to system administrators, to get more credential material, to get some information about how the network works, what's included, etc. Again, talking about lateral movement, they jump from one host to another. They may just execute some commands, execute Cobalt Strike beacon loaders, or use, for example, in Packet to execute commands on remote hosts, or transfer some tools that may even include ransomware, because it may be transferred before the day of actual execution. So everything that they need during this period, they may transfer any tools they need. And of course, then they get to the host that they want. They most likely exfiltrate data. This may be databases, maybe some personal data, contracts, emails. It depends on what company is it, and what kind of sensitive data it has. And the last level, so again, 3 more steps, or during deployment preparation stage, it's still possible to detect, so you can prevent deployment, but most likely sensitive data was already exfiltrated. Usually on this stage, the threat actors remove backups, they disable security controls, because they don't want antivirus software or EDR software interact with their ransomware, and they choose distribution spot. So in most cases, the distribution spot is the domain controller, some of them, but in some cases, especially if the threat actors use VPN for access to the enterprise network, they may use their own host as distribution point. So once they decided, once they removed backups, disabled security controls, chose distribution spot, they transfer ransomware sample and decide on how they're going to deploy it. They may use group policy, they may use PS exec, they may mount C drives of various hosts, and not only C drives, to a distribution point and execute ransomware samples on it. So it depends on the threat actor. Also, they may use, for example, new service creation for deployment. Again, it depends. And of course, they'll deploy ransomware. But it's not the last step, because another very important part of the kill chain is extortion, because threat actors want to get money. Most of them are interested only in getting money. So they encrypt data as they deploy ransomware. They exfiltrate data, so it's data theft. If it's quite big business, and for example, the victim doesn't want to interact with the threat actors, they may perform DDoS attacks. Okay. So we saw it quite a few times. REvil, Logbits, and some others, they did it quite often. And also, one more thing is harassment. They may send emails to partners of compromised company. They may publish some information publicly or even on Twitter, or provide some information to journalists. It depends on the threat actors. They may even call to the company's employees. So very, very different types of harassment. Okay, let's look a bit on top 10 techniques that were used by various ransomware affiliates. So first of all, of course, it's command and script interpreter. So threat actors use various, just like I think any other threat actors, not only ransomware affiliates. PowerShell, CMD, JavaScript interpreters. So if you look at any modern bot or any capabilities of modern post-exploitation frameworks, you may see that most of them abuse various command and script interpreters. Then, of course, remote services, because threat actors need to move laterally. So they most likely will abuse remote services. Of course, again, remote system discovery. Threat actors are not interested in encrypting just one host or just one server. They want to encrypt as much as possible. They want to exfiltrate sensitive data, so they need to understand where they can jump from the initially compromised server or workstation. Impaired defenses. Threat actors usually stop antivirus software, stop EDRs and all that. And at the same time, in many cases, especially recently, threat actors tend to remove logs, and make our job as incident responders and incident investigators a bit more difficult. Less credential dumping, another very popular techniques. Some threat actors still use mimikatz, while others may use prods dump. They may use task manager to, for example, dump LSAS, or use built-in tools like Commerce VCS DLL to dump credentials. It's not the only way that's used by threat actors to get access to credential material, but still this one of the most common. Some are trying to use Kerberos, for example, but it's still not that common as credential dump. Encrypted data for impact and inhibit system recovery. So almost any incident finishes then ransomware is deployed, so the data is encrypted. And of course, any ransomware sample tries to delete volume shadow copies, so built-in recovery capabilities for the rating system. That's why these two techniques are very common as well. As I mentioned a few times, most of the attacks contain data exfiltration stage. So most of the threat actors use various web services like Miga, DropMe files, and others to exfiltrate data. So this technique also very, very commonly used by ransomware affiliates. As most threat actors use bots and post-exploitation frameworks, we see a lot of abuse of RunDLL32 and RegSVR32. So silent binary proxy execution, a very popular technique as well. And last but not least, system services. Again, as very common tools are tools like CobbleStrike, Impacket, and for example, PSExec. All of these tools are based on creating a new service, at least some of their capabilities, on creating a new service on remote hosts. Then system services, a very common technique. So if we're talking about threat hunting, for example, focusing on 7045 events from system event logs is a very good idea, because almost on every incident you may find a very, very valuable pieces of data. Let's look at top 10 tools. So software network scanner, extremely popular network scanner used by almost any ransomware gang or any partner of ransomware service program. A simple network scanner that's very effective and allows threat actors to collect information about remote systems. Corporate Strike Beacon, of course. Some threat actors try to use other post-exploitation frameworks like Metasploit, or, for example, even some not very common like Sliver. So some threat actors, especially in 2022, trying to use Sliver because it's not that easily detectable. A-defined, a tool for Active Directory reconnaissance, again, very, very popular, and Conti contain information about this tool, including scripts, so many threat actors just copied it and nowadays use it. PS-exec for remote execution or even ransomware deployment. Mimikatz for credential dumping, a very popular tool, but still, as threat actors usually bypass antivirus software or just kill processes of antivirus software or EDR software. If they can, then they still can download Mimikatz and run it. Rclone, another tool, threat actors doesn't use custom stealers, then they just use Rclone to exfiltrate data to various web services like Miga, for example. ProdsDump, another tool for credential dumping. InPacket, a set of Python scripts that's very popular, especially SMB exec. And two more tools, Prods Hacker and IOBit Unlock, are usually used to, for example, kill antivirus software or unlink some processes so the threat actors can encrypt backups, for example. So that's it. If you want to learn more about tactics, techniques, and procedures used by various gangs and look at various examples, and if you still not downloaded it, then now it's a good chance. You can use QR code on the slide to get to the download page and download the report. It's quite big, more than 50 pages, and it's absolutely free, of course. You'll get information about TDPs, you'll get information on detection strategies. So I think it may be quite useful, both if you're doing incident response or if you just want to be sure that you are well protected from human-operated ransomware attacks. But if you think that you don't have enough people or enough skills or monitoring capabilities for your infrastructure, GroupIB provides services that can help you with this. So we provide 24/7 managed detection. So using our XDR solution, our team may monitor your network, and if something wrong happens, then we also have managed response that can help to contain and remediate any malicious activity. At the same time, for advanced threats, we also have managed threat hunting. So as part of this, we'll look at low severity alerts, we'll form various hypotheses to try to detect things that are not that easily detectable, and of course we'll focus on various legitimate tools that are used in your network, because in many cases threat actors, especially when they're talking about human operated ransomware attacks, they use a lot of absolutely legitimate tools. So it's very important to have proper monitoring and proper hunting capabilities so you can detect and remediate any malicious activities on the first level of the unified ransomware kill chain. So that's it. Thanks a lot for joining me today. If you have any questions, I'm super happy to answer them.